there, my name is Kara. Hi there, my name is Kara. I am a nutritionist and intuitive eating counselor, and today we were talking all about the hunger scale, how to understand your hunger to help you become an intuitive eater. So we are going to go through the hunger scale and how to use it to better understand your body's hunger signals and how to respond to them in a way that actually feels good. So hunger is the body's way of telling us that it needs something. There are some types of hunger, like emotional hunger and taste hunger, that are not a signal of biological need for food, but totally valid reasons to eat. So in this video, we are talking about physical hunger. So after years of dieting, restricting food, and trying to control your food intake and body size, it is a totally normal thing to not be in touch with your hunger cues. So when your body is trying to tell you, hey, I need food, you may not be able to hear it quite yet. And that is to be expected after likely ignoring these cues or trying to control them for a very long time. But we can get those hunger cues back, and I will tell you how. One way to help get back in touch with your body and your hunger signals so that you can start to heal your relationship with food and your mind from years of dieting is to use this handy tool in intuitive eating we call the hunger fullness scale. So big side note here, I only use this tool when teaching clients how to learn about and get back in touch with their hunger cues. It is not reasonable or necessary, I think, to continually rate your hunger forever. That can actually end up being super diety, and it's totally okay to eat when you aren't hungry at all. There are different types of hunger, which I will go over in another video. After going through intuitive eating counseling, when we've covered all of the principles, including those focused on hunger and fullness, managing and responding to your hunger becomes second nature. You don't need the hunger scale after a little while. And I even hesitate to use it with the numbers attached to it, but visually and conceptually, it does help a lot. Our brains are used to ranking things from 0 to 10. We do it with many things all the time. So this is a concept that our brains are familiar with. I also want to note that there is no wrong answer when you are gauging your hunger. What one number or range may feel like to you may be totally different to someone else or to you on a different day. So again, the numbers and scale are for learning purposes. When you are totally out of touch with hunger and fullness signals, they're not really to be used long term. I mostly use this tool to explain the concept of primal hunger to clients, and I'll go over that in a minute. So let's take a look at the hunger fullness scale. So the scale goes from 0 to 10, 0 being empty, 10 is totally full. So let's kind of look at each area a little bit more closely. So 0 is painfully hungry. This is primal hunger, which I'll get to. So this is an intense and urgent feeling of hunger. Your body is screaming at you, I need food now, no time to wait. Then we get to 1, which is when you are anxious to eat, you're feeling irritable. This is that hanger feeling. Like, I need to stop what I'm doing and go eat. It's hard to really focus on anything else in that moment. And 2 is very hungry. You need a hearty meal. At this point, you're kind of on the edge of hunger. So from 0 to 2, we would characterize this as unpleasant hunger. It doesn't feel good to be hangry, and it especially doesn't feel good to be painfully hungry when we get all the way to 0, nothing left in the tank, and you're running on fumes. As we go from 3 to 7 on the scale, this is kind of the neutral zone where it's pleasant and comfortable to be. So 3, we have polite hunger. You're hungry and ready to eat. It's likely been about 3 or 4 hours since your last good meal, or 1 or 2 hours since a snack. Then 4, you're just beginning to feel hungry. You're feeling kind of empty. And then 5 is neutral. You're not hungry, you're not full. Then 6 is starting to feel the signs of emerging fullness. So this is where you might notice that the food doesn't taste quite as good as when you started. So when we start, a meal at any level of hunger, that's when the food is going to taste the best it does the whole meal, and it'll kind of go down from there. So you'll notice it diminishes as you continue to eat. Then 7 is comfortable fullness. You're content with how much you've had, you're satisfied, and don't worry if you continually find yourself eating past this point. We will look at why that is in a minute. So 3 to 7, we had neutral, pleasant, hunger, and fullness. Then 8 starts to get less pleasant. Maybe it's like a couple bites past fullness. You're not quite uncomfortable yet, but you're just like a little bit too full. Then 9 is where you're too full. You feel uncomfortable. Maybe you have to unbutton your pants. And then 10 is painfully stuffed. Maybe you're even feeling nauseous by this point. You are just totally full. So these last unpleasant stages of fullness may not fully register until a little bit after you've finished eating. Especially if you are like at a lively dinner with friends, you may be eating, more than you think, and then you realize, oh wow, I'm really full. This has happened to all of us. So what do we do with this information? I'm sure all of you, myself included, have experienced all of these 10 stages of hunger and fullness at some point, maybe very often. So the goal is to stay in that neutral, pleasant range most of the time. To start eating around like a 7 with that kind of polite hunger, then start at a 3 with polite hunger and stop at a 7 when you're comfortably full and content. Of course, this does not always happen or need to always happen. So let's look at 4 common scenarios where you may find yourself in that 0 to 2 range of uncomfortable hunger. Maybe you don't have food available until you get to that unpleasant stage of a 1 or 2. You're running errands, or you're at work, or you're traveling, and you notice the hunger when it starts, but you just aren't able to respond to it until it's more intense and uncomfortable. This is very common to happen. Maybe you have food around, but you're just too busy, or you don't hear the body cues that are telling you that you are in that unpleasant range. Maybe you are so absorbed in work or running after your kids, and it's not until you feel that unpleasant, uncomfortable hunger that you start the process of getting something to eat, because it's not always, available to eat right when we need it. The third scenario is where it's a little more intentional. You hear the hunger cues, but you've told yourself that you can't eat until a certain time, or you are fasting or restricting in another way. Maybe you are kind of saving your food intake for later in the day. This is dieting and a restricting scenario. So the fourth is not necessarily intentional, but after dieting for years, your body is going to stop sending you those pleasant hunger signals. It's going to skip saying, hey, I'm a little empty. Let's start thinking about our next meal. If this is the case, the only type of hunger you may feel is that unpleasant hunger, that chaotic, intense, hangry, anxious, primal hunger. So I've mentioned the phrase primal hunger a few times now already. So what is primal hunger? When you hear the word primal, what do you think of? I think of like a tiger slinking along going after its prey. It's a biologically programmed act. There is no real emotion involved. It's when the body systems have totally taken over. So we experience primal hunger. Remember, this is at like a 0 on the hunger scale. You're totally running on empty because the body simply needs energy to survive. We get energy through calories, through food. Calories are the unit of energy to measure food. When we're at this stage, the body is taking over, cranking out cravings, cranking up the desire, the drive to eat. This is when it feels chaotic and uncomfortable, right? So think about how you eat when you haven't eaten for a really long time. It's hard to slow down. You may find yourself not breathing very much. It's urgent and primal. You can reach primal hunger unintentionally or intentionally, as I've said. So of course there are going to be those times that there just isn't food available or not available right then. It's unavoidable. You didn't prepare ahead of time for whatever reason, it happens. I definitely consider myself an intuitive eater, very in touch with my hunger and fullness signals. And from time to time, I experience primal hunger too. I know what's happening in my body to create that experience, so there's no guilt or judgment associated with it. That's why understanding this hunger scale and just the concept of primal hunger is so important. So think about the times that you have reached primal, totally empty hunger. What typically ends up happening? Pretty much every time you're going to overeat. You're going to swing from the low end of the scale to the overly full end of the scale, past the point of comfortable fullness. And this is a natural thing to happen. You start at one end, you're going to naturally swing to the other extreme. So this is why the goal is to stay kind of in the middle, in that pleasant, more neutral territory. So when we swing from one end to the other, we're going from uncomfortable hunger to uncomfortable fullness. This means the entire eating experience was unpleasant and not really enjoyable. One of the greatest joys in our human lives is experiencing joy and satisfaction from food. I firmly believe that. So to get the most satisfaction out of our eating experience, to stay in that pleasant hunger to pleasant fullness range, it's so important to practice responding to those initial signs of hunger before it gets urgent. So if you are totally new to intuitive eating or coming off of years or decades of dieting, it can take time and patience. And remember what I said earlier, that if you have been intentionally ignoring those hunger cues for a long time, your body may not be sending those polite hunger signals anymore. You may experience the unpleasant hunger signals as the first sign of hunger. And that's totally normal and able to be resolved. So how do we get back in touch with our hunger cues? You simply eat when you're hungry. And over time, your body will say, wow, you're listening to me now. I'm going to send you those polite signals again, right? I'll send them earlier when it's polite hunger instead of waiting until it's unpleasant and primal and urgent and chaotic and